Colin Firth seemed to have it all. A legendary actor, an Oscar winner, a man who portrayed some of cinema's most beloved characters. But behind the polished red carpets and standing ovations, something darker was unfolding. In 2022, at the height of his career, his life took a turn that few saw coming, and the reason why remains deeply personal and largely untold. This is the story of how success couldn't protect him from one of life's cruelest realities. Colin Firth wasn't supposed to become a star. He grew up in a modest household in Hampshire, England, the son of a professor and a journalist. His parents weren't connected to Hollywood. They weren't famous. They were ordinary people raising an ordinary boy who happened to dream of acting. But there was something different about young Colin, a quiet intensity, a depth in his eyes that suggested he understood emotions most people couldn't quite name. He trained at the Drama Centre London, one of the most rigorous acting schools in the world. The training was brutal. Students were pushed to their limits, forced to dig into the darkest corners of human experience. This wasn't about becoming famous. This was about becoming a real actor. Colin thrived there. He learned that great acting wasn't about looking good or sounding right. It was about truth. It was about finding the real person hiding inside every character. His early roles were forgettable. Small parts in British television. Nobody knew his name. But he kept working, kept improving, kept waiting for his moment. And then, in 1984, something shifted. A role here, a performance there. Slowly, the film industry began to notice the quiet English actor who could make you believe anything he portrayed. By the 1990s, he was becoming a familiar face. People started to recognize him on the street. But recognition wasn't fame. Not yet. Then came 1995, and a film that would change everything. Pride and Prejudice. Colin Firth as Mr. Darcy. The role was iconic, demanding, complex. He had to play a man who seemed cold and arrogant on the surface, but was actually deeply feeling and principled underneath. It required the kind of acting that makes people forget they're watching a performance. When that miniseries aired, something extraordinary happened. The world fell in love with Colin Firth. Suddenly, he wasn't just an actor. He was a leading man. He was the kind of actor that filmmakers wanted to work with. Success came faster after that. Film roles. Award nominations. Recognition from his peers. By 2010, Colin Firth had become one of the most respected actors of his generation. He won an Academy Award for The King's Speech, one of the greatest acting honors in the world. He was 50 years old. He had a beautiful wife, a seemingly perfect family, and a career that most actors could only dream about. But nobody knew what was happening behind closed doors. From the outside, Colin Firth's life looked like a fairy tale. He was married to Livia Giugioli, an Italian producer, and together they had 2 children. They lived in a beautiful home. They attended the most prestigious events in the entertainment world. Photos showed a man who seemed content, who smiled at the right moments, who appeared to have achieved everything he'd ever wanted. The narrative was simple: hard work pays off. Talent meets opportunity. Dreams come true. But life is rarely that simple. In interviews, Colin was always measured, always thoughtful. He didn't give much away. He talked about his craft, about the characters he played, about the importance of authenticity in acting. He was private, which only made people more curious about him. There was an air of mystery around Colin Firth, a sense that there was more to him than what he showed the world. Fans loved that about him. It made him seem deeper, more real, more human than other celebrities who overshared on social media. What made Colin different from so many other actors was his reluctance to chase fame. He didn't court controversy. He didn't post constantly online. He didn't use his celebrity to build an empire of endorsement deals. He simply acted. He did his job brilliantly, and then he went home to his family. There was something admirable about that restraint, something that suggested a man who understood what actually mattered in life. His career continued to flourish. Roles in major films. Critical acclaim. He became the kind of actor that other actors respected. Directors fought to work with him. Studios wanted his name on their projects. By his 60s, Colin Firth had transcended the typical arc of a Hollywood career. He wasn't just famous anymore. He was important. He was an institution. And yet, even as his professional life reached new heights, something was deteriorating in his personal world. The cracks were beginning to show, though few people could see them. His marriage, which had seemed so solid, was becoming unstable. The relationship that had produced 2 beautiful children, that had lasted for decades, was slowly coming apart. Neither of them was talking about it publicly. They were keeping up appearances, doing what many couples do when a marriage is in trouble, pretending everything is fine. Nobody knew the real struggle that was happening behind the scenes. But in 2022, everything changed in a way that forced the truth into the open. In March 2022, Colin Firth did something completely out of character. He went to the police. Not as a victim reporting a crime, but as a man seeking protection. He filed a report claiming that he had been the target of a stalker, someone who had been harassing him and his family for years. The news shocked the entertainment world. Colin Firth, the private actor who never made headlines, was suddenly at the center of a very public legal situation. The stalker, according to reports, was a man named Marco Brancatelli. He had allegedly been sending threatening messages and showing up at places where Firth frequented. But here's what made the situation even more complicated, even more tragic. Brancatelli was not a random stranger. He had connections to Firth's estranged wife, Livia Giugioli. There were allegations that Brancatelli had been hired, or at least encouraged, to target Colin. The situation spiraled into a nightmare of accusations, counter-accusations, and legal battles that would consume the next years of Firth's life. What started as a stalking case became something far more complex. It became intertwined with his crumbling marriage, with questions about loyalty, with the kind of human betrayal that cuts deeper than any physical harm. The man he had built a life with, the woman he had children with, was now at the center of a controversy that threatened everything he had worked for. The private actor suddenly found himself dragged into a very public scandal. The media descended. Tabloids speculated. Social media erupted with theories and judgments. People who had admired Colin Firth for decades were suddenly confused. What was happening? How could the quiet, dignified actor find himself in such a mess? Some people took his side. Others questioned whether there was more to the story than what was being reported. The uncertainty was agonizing. But Colin didn't respond with anger or lengthy explanations. He remained silent, as he always did. He let the legal system do its work. He endured the embarrassment, the invasion of privacy, the public scrutiny. He had to protect his children from the chaos. He had to navigate a separation from the woman he had loved for years. And he had to do all of this while the world watched and judged. What made this tragedy even deeper was the timing. Colin was 65 years old. Most people at that age are thinking about legacy, about enjoying the fruits of their labor, about spending time with family. Instead, he was caught in legal proceedings that dredged up pain and betrayal. The life he had built so carefully was crumbling in real time. And nobody truly understood the depth of his suffering. Here's what the headlines missed. Here's what the tabloids didn't understand. Colin Firth wasn't just dealing with a stalking case or a messy divorce. He was experiencing something far more profound, the complete dismantling of the life he thought he had built. For nearly 20 years, he had been married to Livia. 20 years of shared memories, inside jokes, plans for the future, dreams that seemed permanent. And then, suddenly, it was over. The pain of that kind of loss is almost impossible to articulate. It's not like losing a job or failing a project. It's losing your partner. It's losing the future you had planned together. It's looking at someone you loved and realizing that person was not who you thought they were. It's questioning every memory, every moment of tenderness, wondering if any of it was real. That's the kind of heartbreak that doesn't make it into news articles. What we know is that Colin and Livia separated in late 2022, just months after the stalking allegations emerged. The separation was described as mutual, but separations are never really mutual. Someone is always hurting more. Someone is always holding on longer. Someone is always wondering if things could have been different. Colin had to face something that many people never have to confront at his level of visibility. He had to grieve his marriage publicly. He had to answer questions about it. He had to read speculation and judgment from strangers who had never met him, who knew nothing about his relationship, but felt entitled to an opinion anyway. That kind of exposure, that kind of vulnerability forced upon you, is a particular kind of cruelty. And then there was the question of his children. How do you explain to your kids that their parents are separating? How do you help them understand that love sometimes isn't enough? How do you be present for them while you're falling apart yourself? Colin had to figure all of that out while maintaining his professional life, while still showing up to work, while still pretending to be fine. Before we continue, think about this: how many times have you had to smile and act like everything was okay when your world was actually falling apart? Let me know in the comments. Many of us have been there. The tragedy wasn't just that his marriage ended. It was that it ended in a way that was public, messy, and tied to allegations that painted everyone involved in a negative light. There was no clean ending. There was no simple narrative where Colin could move forward without carrying the weight of all this pain and confusion with him. By 2023, Colin Firth had largely disappeared from public view. He wasn't on red carpets. He wasn't doing press tours. He wasn't visible in the way he had been before. Some people assumed he was taking a break from acting. Others wondered if the scandal had damaged his career beyond repair. But the truth was simpler and sadder than that. He was trying to survive. Divorce is brutal at any age. But at 65, after decades of marriage, it carries a different weight. You're not starting over in your 30s with your whole life ahead of you. You're starting over when you've already lived most of your life in a particular way. You have to rebuild your identity without the person who was part of that identity for so long. You have to figure out who you are when you're no longer half of a partnership. There was also the legal battle to contend with. The stalking case against Marco Brancatelli continued through 2023 and into 2024. Colin had to testify. He had to relive the harassment and fear. He had to publicly detail the threats and invasions of privacy that had terrorized him and his family. Each court appearance was another reminder of the betrayal, another wound reopened. The legal system moved slowly, as it always does, and Colin had to live in a state of unresolved trauma for years. What's particularly heartbreaking is how little credit Colin gets for how he handled all of this. He didn't lash out. He didn't give angry interviews. He didn't trash-talk his ex-wife or seek sympathy from the public. He simply endured. He kept his dignity. He protected his children as much as he could. He let the legal process unfold without sensationalizing it. That takes an extraordinary kind of strength, the kind that goes unrecognized because it's quiet. His work became his refuge. In 2023, he appeared in the film Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. It was a return to acting after a long absence, a signal that he was trying to move forward. The role was smaller than what audiences might have expected from an Oscar-winning actor, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that he was working again, that he was creating, that he was reminding himself that he was still an actor, still a professional, still capable of doing what he loved. But everyone who knows anything about trauma knows that moving forward isn't a linear process. You don't just decide to heal and then heal. You have setbacks. You have moments where the pain rushes back with unexpected intensity. You have nights when you can't sleep because your mind won't stop replaying everything that went wrong. Colin had to live through all of that while the world moved on and forgot about his struggle. The tragedy of Colin Firth isn't just that his marriage ended. It's that it ended so publicly, so messily, at an age when he should have been enjoying the peace that comes with a successful life. It's now 2024, and Colin Firth is 64 years old. The stalking case has largely faded from headlines, though it was never fully resolved in the way that might bring complete closure. He continues to act, though his film projects are more selective now. He's not chasing roles the way younger actors do. He's choosing work that matters to him, work that allows him to express something true about the human experience. What's remarkable is that Colin has managed to rebuild his life with the same quiet dignity that characterized his career. He hasn't given tell-all interviews. He hasn't written a memoir exposing every painful detail. He hasn't used his trauma as currency for sympathy or attention. Instead, he's simply moved forward, one day at a time, the way most people do when life breaks them and they have to put the pieces back together. His relationship with his children appears to have survived the separation intact. That's not always guaranteed in messy divorces. Many children struggle when their parents separate, especially when the separation is complicated by accusations and public scandal. But Colin seems to have prioritized his kids throughout this entire ordeal, which speaks to his character and his values. The real tragedy here isn't just what happened to Colin Firth. It's what his story reveals about life in general. It's a reminder that success doesn't protect you from pain. It's a reminder that even people who seem to have everything, talent, wealth, respect, achievement, are still vulnerable to heartbreak and betrayal. It's a reminder that at 65, you can still find your world turned upside down by circumstances beyond your control. If you're enjoying stories that reveal what really happened behind the headlines, make sure you subscribe because the next story on this channel explores another celebrity whose life took an unexpected and tragic turn that most people never knew about. What makes Colin's story particularly poignant is how he's handled it. He didn't become bitter. He didn't retreat from the world completely. He didn't let this experience define him or destroy his spirit. He simply endured, which is perhaps the most human response to tragedy. He acknowledged the pain without being consumed by it. Today, Colin Firth is still acting, still working, still creating. He's older now, marked by the experiences he's lived through, but perhaps also wiser. He understands things about loss and resilience that most people learn too late or not at all. He knows that life doesn't always go according to plan, that partnerships can end, that public humiliation is survivable, and that there's dignity in simply showing up and doing your best, even when everything else is falling apart. The tragedy of Colin Firth isn't that his life ended badly. It's that his life was disrupted by circumstances that shouldn't have happened to anyone, let alone someone who had worked so hard and sacrificed so much to build something meaningful. But perhaps the real victory is that he survived it. He's still here. He's still working. He's still human, still vulnerable, still moving forward. Many people watching have gone through moments where life didn't go as planned, where relationships ended, where public failure felt unbearable, where you had to rebuild from scratch. If you've ever faced something similar, you're not alone. Your struggle matters, just like Colin's does. But this story isn't the only tragedy that unfolded behind the glamorous facade of Hollywood. The next story on this channel reveals something even more shocking about a beloved actor whose fall from grace was far more public and far more devastating. You won't believe what you're about to discover.